the Young Turks personified, Cenk Uygur.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. You're way too kind. That intro was perfect, and I'll tell you why. Because yes, as Marianne pointed out in the morning, we are going to talk a little bit about what's wrong and how we got here. And I'm definitely also going to talk about how we're going to get out of this mess and how to fix it. But mainly, I'm going to talk about miracles. So, from what I understand, it's a time to remember. And so I want you to remember the miracles that have already happened and the ones that are going to happen. So, first, let me start a little personal, and then I'll get into the miracles that have happened in America and what a miracle it is overall. So, when I started the Young Turks, I started in my living room with a couple of mics, and we would put it on a CD and send it to New York, and they'd put it on the radio. That was 15 years ago, almost exactly now. And if I had said that we will be the leading digital news network in the world, well, that would have been a miracle. And in fact, my dad used to say all the time, what we need, he's a Turkish immigrant, what we need is a miracle. And my dad plays the lottery all the time. He plays it because he likes being hopeful, and I like that about him. He's always filled with hope. But I explained to my dad, I said, Dad, you started as literally an olive farmer in southeastern Turkey with absolutely no money at all and no hope of ever getting money. You started on a patch of dirt near the Syrian border. You now live the American dream. You've got a beautiful house. You put your kids through college. You've got everything you wanted. Dad, you already won the lottery. Dad, but it isn't about winning a lottery, of course. And I want to talk about how we get to miracles, right? And he did it step by step. He got a free education in Turkey at the time, free college education. Otherwise, right now, I would literally be in that same patch of dirt. So can we afford the Bernie Sanders plan of free college education? We can't not afford it. Think about it. First of all, that's 5% of the cost of the Iraq War. And they tell us we can't afford it. So if it wasn't for that free college education, my dad would have never started a business and hired hundreds of people, and I never would have started a business and hired hundreds of people. So it's not just a compassionate thing to do, it's not just a moral thing to do, it's actually the economically sensible thing to do. And it's one of the reasons that I'm a progressive now, because I see that what the American dream is all about is opportunity. Not equality of results, but equality of opportunity. And they want to deny us that. I'm always amazed by the Mitt Romneys and the Koch brothers of the world who want to climb that bridge and then, or cross that bridge and then burn it down after them, right? And I'm amazed by the lack of compassion and humanity in that. So when my dad says, you know, we need a miracle, I said, Dad, you are the miracle. I mean, what you did was miraculous. Now, let me tell you quickly about my mom. My mom comes up to me when I'm in law school, and she comes with a suitcase. I'm in law school in New York, and says, Cenk, I've decided that I'm going to enter the home textile business. Okay. My mom's never done any business before. She didn't go to college. That's not the world she grew up in. But she says, I have these beautiful home textile things. I still don't know what they are. And they're in this suitcase, and you and I are going to go down to ABC Home and Carpet in Manhattan, and we're going to sell them. I said, Mom, you would need a miracle for that. She said, no. We didn't send you to Penn for no reason, okay? You studied business. You're going to come help sell this stuff. Let's go, okay? So, and you got to remember, this is back in the early 1990s. It was literally one of those old school suitcases, you know, that you picked up with a handle, with no wheels, nothing, right? And so we picked that up and we drove down to ABC Home and Carpet, which is one of the, the best stores in New York, etc. And we walk in and we go, we have a suitcase full of stuff we'd like to sell you. And you're not going to believe this. The first person we ran into said, "It's your lucky day." It turns out that it was Wednesday, and Wednesday was open door day for their buyers. And we go up there, and I forget the guy's name, I think it was Steve, and there was no line. Boy, was it our lucky day. We walk in, and Steve's like, "What do you have for me?" And we bring out the suitcase. He's like, "Okay, wow." And we get to talking a little bit, and my mom says, "He's from Penn," right? And Steve says, "Oh my God, I'm from Penn." He bought half the suitcase. So my mom's name is Nuket. She called the business Nuco Creations. And she's sold a lot of stuff throughout the years, but she's best known for her napkins. Her napkins are now in the White House, and Queen Elizabeth has them. You're telling me there aren't miracles? I've lived them. And so now, let me tell you about miracles that you all know about. So the suffragettes took a long time, 70 years overall, and so a lot of people think, well, these things take forever and ever. That's not exactly right. But when they started, everybody told them, "You guys are so silly. Now, how in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. You'd need a miracle." But in reality, from the day they started marching in the streets, it only took 7 years for them to get an amendment to get a right to vote. Only 7 years. And the way that they did that miracle was the same way that my dad did and my mom did, step by step. It doesn't just get gifted to you. You've got to earn it. You've got to work for it. So when that first day that they marched, you think it was easy? They were spit upon, they were attacked, they were brutalized, but that was in the papers and it rallied people so that the next time they marched, it was even larger, and the next time larger, until one day, 2.9 million women got together to march, and the whole world noticed. The reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. So there was another guy who was told things were impossible. His name was Martin Luther King. And when he started, there were separate water fountains. You couldn't sit in the diner. You had to sit in the back of the bus. You guys know the whole story. And they said, how in the world are you going to get those deeply racist folks in the South to change their ways? I mean, this is a culture that has been around for hundreds of years. It is impossible to change that culture. Well, it turns out, once again, not as impossible as they said. But I love Martin Luther King's strategy. That's why he's my hero, because he said, I'm not just going to liberate blacks in the South. He said, I'm going to liberate the whites from the hatred in their hearts. So, and he meant it. He was a reverend, and he did. He said, it's not that I'm angry at them. He said, I feel bad for them. Imagine living with all that hatred in your heart. Imagine what that does to you. He said, we're going to bring them love, and we're going to help them. And he did. One of the great civil rights workers was beaten down over and over again, and I read this story recently, and they firebombed his house. He lived in Alabama, and one day he goes to the courthouse to exercise one of his rights that he has by law and by the Constitution, and the white supremacists at the time set upon him again, and they're beating him down, and as he's being viciously beaten, one of his attackers says, "Why won't you fight back?" And he says, "Because I love you." And those guys won. Now that was a miracle. So it's not like you hear in the press. You know, they're all paid to be skeptics, right? They're all paid to be cynical. And if you think about it, I was just having this conversation last night. Actually, the press used to be very active, very passionate, and what today they would derisively call as activist, right? But at some point it changed, and it became the corporate press. And all of a sudden, it became standard to not care about the news. In fact, you were supposed to do it in a way that was totally dispassionate, right? And you're supposed to read from the prompter and not care about the news. Well, part of the reason they do that is so that you don't get too worked up and instead accept the status quo. Now, why would the guys who run the news companies want you to accept the status quo? Well, almost all of them in the old days were part of multi-billion-dollar corporation. If you're part of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, you don't want to rock the boat because it's your boat. So all those guys, they don't mean bad, but they don't mean harm, but they were selected, pre-selected, to make sure they don't rock the boat. So I was talking to Bill Press, who's now part of the TYT network, just yesterday, and he told me something I didn't know. It turns out Bill and even Pat Buchanan were fired from MSNBC because they opposed the Iraq War. They were doing their version of Crossfire on MSNBC, and it was the best rated in cable news in their time slot. And I had known that a whole host of other people had gotten fired at the time, back in 2003 from MSNBC for that same issue. Phil Donahue, their #1 rated show, fired because he was against the Iraq War. Bill said Phil Griffin, the guy who I had a run-in with later when I was at MSNBC, came to him and said, no, you guys are both against the war. I can't have it. It's not patriotic. We need to go to war. Okay? Gone. Jesse Ventura, another guy I interviewed, had a multi-million-dollar contract. I said, Jesse, I remember when you got that deal. So whatever happened, I never saw you on air. He said, they found out I was against the Iraq War. He said, they wouldn't even let me out of my contract. They paid me millions of dollars to not say anything. And then the most amazing story of all is Ashley Banfield. If you don't know about her courage, you really should read up on it. I'll give you a quick summary. She goes to a college in Kansas right in as the war is starting and gives this super powerful speech about why it's a bad idea. Go back and read that speech. It is brilliant. And for that courage, she is punished. I don't know if you remember, back in '03, Ashley Banfield was an incredible rising star, and MSNBC bragged about getting her, and she was the talk of the town. And what did they do? They immediately took her off air. And she said, wait, okay, but I'm a rising star. I signed a contract with you guys, but I've got all these other people who are interested in me. Great, no problem. Okay, apparently it wasn't a good fit. Let me out of my contract and I'll go elsewhere. They said, no, we're not letting you out of your contract. And by the way, we're moving your office. You know where they moved her office to? Into a closet. Literally. Now, why did they do that? So that they could show everybody else in the building, this is what happens when you rock the boat. Okay, now Ashley was super courageous. She stuck it out. She got back in, and then recently she was on CNN asking the hardest questions there were. I knew her executive producer in the 2012 elections. She did a brilliant job, and she consistently asked the best questions in media, okay? But she had to fight over a decade to get back on air. So now, I have a similar story at MSNBC, but I think you guys get it. So now, that's the state of affairs in media today. And, but let's also talk about politics. It's really important, actually fits in well with the previous speaker. So let's now get into the issues at hand and then how to fix them. So in 1971, it goes back a little further than 1979. In 1971, Lewis Powell writes a memo. I learned this from my good friend Tom Hartman, who's here. And it's a Powell memo. You guys, again, can look it up online. It's clear as day. And he works for the Chamber of Commerce. He's a lawyer for them, really, a consultant. And he says, hey, business interests are not doing a good enough job of taking over the country. You should take over the education. You should take over the media. But by the way, what's really, really important is the Supreme Court. You should take over the Supreme Court. Now, Richard Nixon at the time is getting mauled by Ralph Nader, okay? Now, they say progressives can't be strong. Ralph Nader was so strong, he got Richard Nixon to pass the EPA. He got Richard Nixon to pass OSHA. No, they're lying to you. Progressives were lions. Before the era of money that I'm about to explain to you guys, we won everything. FDR gave us Social Security, and then we got Medicare and Medicaid, and we got the Great Society, and we got even a barbarian like Nixon to do exactly what we wanted, EPA, OSHA, and you name it. We were lions. They say, you're cats, and you can't even herd cats, etc. No. You got the wrong kind of cat, okay? So in 1971, Powell writes the memo, and then Nixon goes, hey, I'm getting killed by these progressives, but this memo makes sense. You know what, Lewis? I'm going to put you on the Supreme Court. And he puts Lewis Powell on the Supreme Court. Now, he made a lot of decisions, and now he's considered a moderate. But the most important thing that he did was actually about business, was about that memo that he wrote. And in terms of corporations and what he gave them, he was not anywhere near moderate. So 2 decisions that made all the difference, not Citizens United. That just shot a dead horse. In 1976, in Buckley v. Vallejo, they said, money is speech. Now, that's absurd on its face. Jamie Raskin, who's a great constitutional scholar and just recently won election, very close to here in Maryland, and is in the U.S. House, and he won it in a year where Republicans did really well, but he's the most progressive guy who got elected, and he still won in the midst of this election, okay? Why? Because he's a strong progressive and he fights. And he gave a speech in the U.S. Congress before he was there and asked people, if money is speech, are people just talking to prostitutes? And it's an interesting analogy, right? I'm just talking to them. What do you mean? I gave them money. And in fact, if you follow that chain of logic, even outright bribery, I'm going to give you a Cadillac, I'm going to give you a Rolex, is not any problem. You're just talking to them. Yeah, money is speech. I gave you money to buy that Cadillac. I was just having a conversation with you, right? 1978, this decision called Bellotti that doesn't get talked about enough. They say, remember, corporations are human beings. Because of that decision we actually didn't make in the late 1800s. Again, Tom Hartman, great history of that. You guys should check out what he's written and said about that. So remember, corporations are human beings, so they have the same speech rights, hence they can give money to politicians. And then it was over. That was the end of our democracy. So I once was interviewing Ralph Nader, and I said, Ralph, you're running roughshod, and you got everybody on the run. Nixon's running from you. What happened? He said, there's a guy named Tony Coelho. He's what happened. I said, who's Tony Coelho? I think I'd heard of him once. It turns out he's a Democratic congressman, and he went to his fellow Democrats and said, hey, did you guys know we can take corporate money now? And he convinced all of them to take corporate money, and the progressive movement died for decades in America. Okay, so I got good news for you. We're going to throw all those bums out. So, from there on, as you know, just real quick, the percentage of taxes that corporations paid used to be about 35% of all taxes in the 1950s. You know, the conservatives talk about the golden age of America, 1950s, 1960s. The highest marginal tax rate at the time was 91%. We want to make America great again? And so the rich paid their fair share, corporations paid their fair share. From 35%, right now it's down to about 9%. So they talk about income redistribution. They should know they did it. They redistributed the taxes to all of you guys. The percentage of taxes that went up, the highest bracket by a great margin, was the payroll tax. Payroll tax is the most regressive tax. It is paid only by the poor and the middle class, and the rich stop paying it. Isn't that amazing? Right in front of your eyes, they shifted the tax burden from multinational corporations, and every once in a while they talk about corporate America. There is no corporate America. They're not patriotic. They're not humans. They're machines. They're owned by shareholders all across the world. They're executives from all across the world. They're multinational corporations. We built these machines, and now they are running amok. You see all those movies where the robots take over? We're in that movie. And the robots are the corporations. We designed them to make a profit at all costs, to maximize profit. And we did not write any other code. We didn't write the code of, hey, by the way, be decent to human beings. We didn't write that code. So you know what we have to do? We have to rewrite the code. So how are we going to rewrite the code? Well, right now they're dominant. They shifted the taxes. And by the way, there's these great charts about American productivity, the workers. 100% fantastic, through the roof. It goes just like this, right? From all the way back to the 1900s to now. And then you see wages, median wages in America, and it's going straight up until 1978, and then it flatlines, okay? And the difference, and I've talked to Bob Reich about this, so it's just a little too simplistic, but the difference between those two charts, between productivity and the average American worker's income, is about $12 trillion. They redistributed $12 trillion of American productivity into their own pockets, okay? That is the greatest American robbery we have ever seen. So, how do we rewrite the code? Well, I've got a couple of ideas. First of all, on the media, we started something that is independent, and we are unbowed. And so, every once in a while, I'll have somebody in the media yell at me. I've lost a lot of business deals because of this. You're an activist. We were recently denied press passes in Washington because we care. We're activists, we're told. How dare you want to change what is wrong? Don't you know your role? You're in news. You're supposed to bow your head and get everybody else to bow their head and just accept the way things are. You're supposed to be neutral. I'm supposed to be neutral? I mean, forget Donald Trump. I'm supposed to be neutral to $12 trillion worth of robbery? No, I'm not neutral to that. I got into news because I care about news, because I care about the country. And when I see a news event, I think, well, one, I got to share it with people. I got to tell people. And then I got to tell them how to fix it. Right? So step one is reclaim the media. So we've done it in our own way, and right now, online, yes, that little show that started in my living room is larger than CNN. I was a 6 o'clock host on MSNBC. Now my show is so much larger than the entire MSNBC network online that I can't see them in my rearview mirror. So that's how we reclaim the media, but I need you to understand that, like my dad, you are the miracle, okay? You can do it. So, and it's step by step. We worked 15 years for this, and you need to work as hard in whatever it is that drives you and that is your passion. And if it's media, grab a phone and get to work. Anybody can do it. As you saw earlier today from that great video shot at Ground Zero, that was so powerful, and you can do that, and you could put it up. And we've been at Standing Rock from day one. We've gone back 6 times. We're there right now. We were the first national camera there. Amy Goodman did great work there. We were there with her. And so CNN brags, hey, we're in 100 million homes. I'm in 3 billion pockets. But so are you. So are you. One of the videos we did, we put on one of our smaller channels on Facebook about Standing Rock. It got 7 million views anyway, okay? And sometimes if you go out there and you are the change, you'd be amazed at what you could accomplish. So that's the media. The second part is getting money out of politics. That's the most important thing. That is by far, of all the things I do, that is by far the most important thing. So in the midst of running this network and hosting the flagship show, I decided, why not spend more time working? So I started something called Wolfpack. And so wolf-pack.com, please go and volunteer if you can. We've got 35,000 volunteers across the country. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. They tell us it's impossible. I don't think they know what that word means. So if women can get the right to vote when they didn't have the right to vote, I think we can get a constitutional amendment that 90% of Americans agree with. Every state, so now, there's 2 ways to get an amendment. I'll do this real quick. You can go through Congress and get 2/3 of Congress to vote on it. That is unfortunately the strategy of most folks here in Washington. Now, do you think 2/3 of this Congress is going to vote to get money out of politics? No way, right? So the other way you can do it is because the Founding Fathers were both geniuses and revolutionaries, is you could do it through the states. Why? They wanted to make revolution easier. And they wanted to make you have the ability to do it without having to do what they did, which is pick up a musket, right? Since they were revolutionaries, they built revolution into the document. It's amazing. And in that Article 5 where they tell you how to get an amendment, they say, okay, you can go through Congress, but we know at some point it will become too corrupt. The other way you do it is through the states. So you get 2/3 of the states to call for a convention. And in that convention, they can propose amendments. Now, whatever amendments they propose, it's okay. Then 3/4 of the states have to ratify no matter what. It's not easy to get an amendment. It's extraordinarily difficult. We have actually, in some ways, the hardest system to get an amendment, but that's good. You don't want to mess with the Constitution willy-nilly. You want to make sure that if you're amending the Constitution, it is something of paramount importance. Do we think this is of paramount importance? So that is how you rewrite the code. The Constitution is the programming for the country and for our democracy and for our government. We had it in there in the first place. The Supreme Court just robbed us of it. It doesn't say in the Constitution that money is speech. They made that up. It doesn't say corporations are human beings. Read the Founding Fathers. Almost all of them warned, watch out for corporations. They will run amok, right? They were right, and they did run amok. Luckily, Article 5 of the Constitution is break glass in case of emergency, okay? And boy, do we have an emergency. And so we need to do that right now. And so when we went to all these different states, every time we're told, oh, no, you'll never win here, you'll never win here, and you'll never get Republicans to vote with you. Well, in Missouri, we got 86 Republicans to vote with us. In Texas, we got the most conservative lawmaker to introduce our legislation. We've done it one in 5 different Republican-led legislatures. And in Rhode Island, the most recent state that we won, the senators warned the people in the gallery, because we had filled the gallery, hey, there's no celebrations here if you happen to win, and you're not allowed to applaud, okay? They voted unanimously for our legislation, including every Democrat and every Republican. And then the senators, and I've never seen this in over 20 years of covering politics, the senators stood up and applauded the gallery. You want to see a miracle, look at our Wolfpack volunteers, okay? Our national directors, Mike, used to work putting up wires on telephone poles, never worked a day in his politics. I found him standing in the snow in New Hampshire by himself holding up a Wolfpack sign. And I said, now this guy's got something, okay? Allison was a teacher in Orange County. And she'd never heard of the Young Turks. A lot of people come to Wolfpack from the Young Turks, but she'd never heard of the Young Turks. She went online and she thought to herself, now there's something wrong with our government, I can tell, okay? So I'm gonna do 2 things, swear to God, absolute true story. She said, I'm gonna figure out what went wrong and how to fix it, okay? She's just sitting there, teacher, never been involved in politics, young, I think she was in late 20s at the time. She goes online and she figures out, oh, does a ton of research. She's like, I got it, money in politics. That's what's wrong. And then she researches all these different things and tries to figure out what's a logical way to solve it. She goes through all the different groups. She's like, Congress, Supreme Court, we're going to wait for somebody to die. And by the way, look for all the folks who thought, hey, we'll just regain the Supreme Court. That didn't work well, right? And she got to Wolfpack and she's like, wait, that's really logical. That is a path. It's not an easy path, but it's a path. I see how that works. We go state by state. We gain momentum as we go along. You get the 34 states. You get the convention. You have an amendment, and then you get the 38 states. I get it. That's what I'm going to do. She's now one of our national directors. She is an amazing organizer. I mean, the infrastructure that she's built for our 35,000 volunteers is amazing, right? And then I can go on all day. ACES, who we just hired, used to work in construction. Bryant LeMay, we called a mechanic. Do you know why? Because he's a mechanic. And so this was the original idea of democracy, that regular citizens get together and they participate in democracy. So we always say what we're going for, and everybody's got a slightly different idea on how to do it, but we're going for free and fair elections. What does that mean? Free from the corrupting influence of money, and fair enough so that any American can run and represent us. So now, Wolfpack's already won in 5 states, and guess how many states we're going to win in? We're going to win in 34 states. We're going to get a convention. I don't care what anybody says. We're going all the way to a convention. What I always say is, I'll see you at the convention, okay? And they say, well, but if we have a convention, the Koch brothers will bring X, Y, or Z. Yeah, but I'm going to bring you guys. So you think we don't have an army? In Illinois, where we won, there was one of our volunteers in the legislative office when she got a call from another one of our volunteers, and she said, what is with your mountain army, right? We can't stop you guys. That's right. When you've got people power, they can't stop you. So, let me speed up real quick and tell you the last part, because we just launched it 2 weeks ago. So, unfortunately, one of the impediments here, and you see I haven't talked much about Trump, because all these problems existed well before Citizens United and well before Trump. Trump didn't create them, he is the result of them. Okay, if you have corporate money in politics and you have this kind of institutional systemic corruption, you will inevitably get a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump election. That's how the system was built. That's why we got to rebuild the system. But before you get to the problem of Trump and the Republicans, you have to be honest about what happened with Tony Coelho, what happened with those Supreme Court decisions, and what happened in the Democratic Party. So step one is to reclaim our own house, okay? So everybody was talking about it, and I said, you know what, as usual, even though I'm a talk show host, I'm tired of the talking. Let's get to doing, okay? So I got together a couple of senior advisors from Bernie's campaign and another host from the TYT network, Kyle Kalinske, and we said, well then and I remember on election night, one of my co-hosts, Alonzo Bowden, was very frustrated. And he said, look, now they got, and it's true, look at what the corporate Democrats have left us with. They've got the White House. The most unpopular man to ever run for president won the White House because of Democratic incompetence, okay? They've got the White House, they've got the Senate, they've got the House, they've got the Supreme Court, but most importantly, they have 69 out of 99 state legislatures, okay? The Democrats have the demographic advantage. They have the advantage on almost every single policy issue, yet they have lost almost everything. So get out the way, yo. Get out the way. Okay. So now the reason for that, by the way, is because they are paid to lose. What do donors want? They want strong right-wingers to push deregulation and tax cuts for them, and they want weak Democrats to say, there was nothing we could do. So, what do they fund? They fund weak Democrats. It's not an accident. That's how they built the system. Why do you think that all of a sudden progressives who are lions all of a sudden are the weakest guys you've ever seen in your life? Because they're paid to be weak. They're paid to lose. So how do you fix that? You start a new wing of the Democratic Party that doesn't take any corporate money. So what we started is called the Justice Democrats, because it's time for justice. It's time for social justice, economic justice, racial justice, environmental justice, and just justice. So that's justicedemocrats.com. Again, take over the Democratic Party. I'm told by the rest of the press that's impossible. You're going to need a miracle. In 2 weeks, we've gotten over 100,000 people to sign up to be part of the justice wing of the Democratic Party, okay? And I was talking to another person who works in the press, and he's like, 100,000 people in 2 weeks? I said, yes. He said, but the rest of the press didn't cover it. I said, yes. We don't need them, okay? So we asked for nominees, and I'm going to tell you right now, one, go sign up at justicedemocrats.com, join the fight back. No Justice Democrat is allowed to take corporate money or big donor money, okay? And we're going to put them in the House of Representatives, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to represent you. And they're going to be, just like in Wolfpack, they're going to be regular Americans, and we're asking all of you, most importantly, go nominate someone, okay? So nominate someone in your community that you know is a fighter that fights for you, who represents you. And right now we've had Iraq War veterans, we've had teachers, we've had doctors, we've had accountants, and we thought we'd get maybe a couple hundred people because the show's, you know, it's pretty decent size. We thought maybe a couple hundred people will nominate their fellow Americans. In 2 weeks, we've had over 2,400 nominees. Okay, so by the way, just real quick, don't nominate yourself. okay? If you are a true believer, you'll have someone who loves you, who can nominate you, okay? But find the people who fight for their community, who love their community, who want to truly represent their community. And we're going to take those folks and we're going to put them in Congress. And they say, well, I mean, Cenk and the Bernie guys and all that. Now, but you're not going to primary Democrats and hurt their chances, are you? Well, first of all, they've hurt our chances of not having a maniac as president, our chances of having progressive policies. They've ended that through the corporate democratic system for the last 40 years. So we're done with them. We're done with them. We're going to primary all of them. So, in conclusion, I'm going to ask you guys, now you know, okay, now you know, through both personal stories and political stories and through history, that miracles do happen. They don't happen overnight. They happen step by step with a lot of hard work. And they happen when a group of committed citizens get together and say, we are unstoppable, okay? And this country was built on people power, and what I see in front of me is people power. So I'm going to ask you to get involved in any way. Even if it's not our groups, no problem. Just get involved. Get involved in your local community. Get involved in a national group. Get involved in the fight back. And as you'll see, and the guys who win in their individual states in Wolfpack tell me this all the time. Fulfillment is a hell of a drug. And they say Allison said this when we won in California. She said a legislator at some point on the phone got a little scared of her. Not of her personally, of course, but of the power that she had built up because she had over 1,000 volunteers in California she was ready to unleash, okay? And she said it felt so good to take the power back. Okay, so whether it's Young Turks, it's Wolfpack, or Justice Democrats, I'm gonna ask you guys to take the power back. And I want to remind you and I want to thank you because I am positive that you are the miracle. Thank you.
Cenk Uygur! Cenk Uygur! The Young Turks! Cenk Uygur!
so that we're all empowered together. But when I see the reaction like that, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, because you empower me. So